Hey friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and I'm back with another video. Just gonna kind of update you on everything that's going on here on the homestead. We started the week out going to our local greenhouse, picking out some beautiful flowers and things for the garden. It's finally warm enough for us to be able to plant things out, but we've had so much rain, it's been impossible to get in the garden this week. So we're kind of waiting to do that. Another thing that we were up to this week, we had to drive up and get our Azure Standard order, so I thought I would share with you what we got this month. It had been 2 months since we had placed an Azure Standard order, so I was low on a few things and needed to stock up on a few things. I was surprised to find that prices really hadn't changed that much, despite everything I keep hearing about prices going up, so that was wonderful. Let me show you what we got. So we started out with 5 pounds of organic raisins. With lots of little children, you can never have enough raisins in the house for snacks. We got 5 pounds of dairy-free white chocolate chips for baking. They were out of regular chocolate chips, so we went ahead and got white chocolate chips this time. Then we got 5 pounds of dried cranberries. These are apple juice infused, so I like them. They're a little lower sugar than traditional craisins. We also got 5 pounds of organic cassava flour. This is an organic flour that I really like. It subs really well 1 for gluten flour, and I use that for my baking. Then we got 4 bottles of coconut aminos. I didn't mean to get 4 bottles. That was an accident, but we will use them. Just keep them in storage. And then I got a big container of Adam's favorite organic sushi ginger. He really loves that. It's delicious. Grilling season is here, and we like to use this Montreal steak seasoning on just about any meat that we grill. Pork chops, steaks, chicken legs, you name it, and we tend to use this on it. So I got a pound of it just so we were stocked up and prepared. And then this is my favorite veggie herb mix. I get this to make a dairy-free vegetable dip when we want raw vegetables. I just make homemade mayonnaise. I thin it out with a little bit of cashew milk, and then I add some of this veggie herb mix, and it makes a really delicious veggie dip. And when you're dairy free, it's hard to find veggie dips that you can have for your raw vegetables. So we were out of it. I'm happy to have that stocked back up. Next, I got 2 packages of my favorite vegan yogurt starter culture, and I use this to make coconut yogurt. I think I've showed that in another video. We also got 50 pounds of organic rolled oats. We go through oats fairly quickly here with this many children between making granola and oatmeal, so all stocked up for that for a while. This is my favorite brand of pasta, gluten-free pasta. This is rice pasta, and I got 10 pounds of spaghetti because we were nearly out. So it comes in this great big bag, which is kind of inconvenient. So let me show you how I store this. I have this old pretzel container that works perfectly to fit 10 pounds of pasta in it. And so that's what I do. I just take it out of the bag and store it there. We also got 5 gallons of my favorite dish soap. This comes in this big 5-gallon container, and then you can put a pump here in this hole, and I keep it under my kitchen sink. And then I have a smaller dish soap container up by the sink, and then I just kind of pump into it as it empties. And then we'll go through one of these 5-gallon buckets between 9 to 12 months. I find I only need to buy this maybe once a year. And then we're all set on dish soap, and I don't have to worry about running out. Up next, we got a case of coconut cream. This is organic. It doesn't have any of the junky fillers and things in it. I use this to make my yogurt and ice cream, and it is almost ice cream season. So I will show you today how I make my ice cream here in a minute. And then we got a case of pureed butternut squash. Butternut squash is cheaper than getting canned pumpkin, and they substitute perfectly, so I always like to keep that stocked in the pantry. Also got 2 cases of our favorite tomato paste. This is what we use to make pizza sauce, and we typically use 2 jars per batch of pizza that we make, so I need a lot of that in the pantry. And then I got 10 pounds of this frozen mixed vegetables. We use this to make chicken pot pie, vegetable soups, and I just needed some convenience food and bought this for that reason because we're in a busy season, and that will help. All right, 3 more bags of organic cranberries. I had made cranberry juice out of these a couple months ago for you guys, and I'm wanted to have more in stock for when we run out of that cranberry juice and I can go ahead and can up another batch. So it's a really cheap way to make some organic cranberry juice. And then finally, I got some plant starts. I've been buying plant starts from Azure for about 9 years now, and I have never been disappointed. It always amazes me how these plants can sit in a dark truck for a week and come out looking this beautiful. So they also sell seeds. I get a lot of my gardening supplies from Azure. This year, I just bought some random herbs that some of these are herbs that I have a hard time starting from seed here myself. And so I just went ahead and bought some starts to add to my perennial herb garden. And that's everything. That was my order for this month. So we're pretty stocked up and I'm happy with where we're at in our food storage. As promised, let me show you what I'm going to do with that coconut cream to make my ice cream. So what I'll do is just fill the bottom of my blender with some frozen fruit. Today I'm doing just some mixed berries, and I don't really measure it out. You can just see what I do here. And then I'm going to add 2 cans of this organic coconut cream. I'm also going to add some of our homegrown raw honey to sweeten it a little bit. Once again, no measuring. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And you guys know by now, if you want a recipe from me, you just kind of have to gauge how much I'm pouring in here. So add that to sweeten it. And then I'm going to empty these 2 cans into the blender. That's what it looks like. And then we're just going to blend this up until it's all creamy and mixed together. I don't use an ice cream maker, obviously, to make this ice cream. So all I do once it's all blended is I just pour it into a bowl and stick it in the freezer. I take it out every, couple hours and kind of try to stir it around so that it doesn't freeze into this hard chunk. I just kind of want it to freeze up enough so that I can scoop it out. And this is our version of dairy-free ice cream. It can be very expensive to buy dairy-free ice cream in the store, and I find that this is a much more affordable way to do this for, my children, for a large family. So we'll either eat it in a bowl or I will buy some ice cream cones and the kids will eat it that way. I'll show you some other ice cream recipes here as the summer progresses. All right, it is a rainy Tuesday here, and it's the time of year where really the only place I want to be is out in my garden planting things, but since it's a rainy day and I can't be out there, I figured I needed to come up with something else to do to feel productive today. So I've decided to tackle the task of reorganizing my pantry shelves. You guys know I focus a lot during the winter months and early spring on using up our food storage. All of the food that we harvested and preserved last growing season needs to be used up so that the jars are emptied, the freezer is emptied to make room for what we will be harvesting and preserving this year. And so I feel like I did a decent job of doing that this year, but the problem is as I've been emptying jars, I've done a terrible job of kind of keeping things organized on the shelves. I've just been placing, random empty jars everywhere there's space instead of kind of moving all the empties to one area and all the full stuff to another area. So I know there is stuff deep in the back of the shelves that still need to be used, but I just don't see it and can't access it conveniently. So it's going to sit there. And we talk a lot. I've seen so many videos lately, so much stuff out there on the internet, on Instagram about preparing for food shortages and things like that. And, I do think that that's wise in light of everything that has, we've been hearing about in the news. But also there's an area of preparation that people tend to neglect. And that is just being a good steward of the stuff that you already have. This is why I advocate every year for doing a pantry challenge. If you're going to go to all the work to buy the bulk food, preserve all of the food, you have to have a plan for using it up. Otherwise, it's wasted time, effort, food that's just going to sit on your shelves and go bad, or it's going to lose nutrition over time. It's not going to be as tasty as it would be if you open a jar, 6 months after you can it. If you let it sit there for 2 years on the shelf, it just isn't as quality of an item. So you do need to have a plan for using that. And so, we can prepare and we can hoard and we can go buy tons of 50-pound bags of rice and beans and oats and wheat berries, and that's great. That's wise, only if you're going to use it. If it's just going to sit there in food storage, it's wasteful. So a lot of us, maybe we don't need to hoard as much stuff, or we don't need to buy as much stuff and put it in storage, maybe a wiser thing to do is to look at what we already have in storage and just use it. An important part of making that happen is making sure that your food storage is organized, that you're rotating things, that you're looking in your freezers and making sure that things are getting used up before they get freezer burned and old and nasty. Otherwise, every time we go to clean out our freezer, we end up having to chuck a whole bunch of food that is just, it's such a waste. So that's my goal today. What I need to do is, like I mentioned, go through my pantry shelves. The first thing I'm looking for is food that has been kind of stored in the back. Like, for example, I know I have canned pears somewhere because we have not eaten a lot of canned pears this year, and I did can a lot last fall. So I need to find where they are. I believe they're on the top shelf, kind of tucked in the back. So I'm going to kind of pull those things toward the front and get them down lower somewhere where they're easily accessible for the children to grab for snacks and things. I'm going to take all of the empty jars and get them in one area of the pantry shelf. I need to look at my bulk dried goods. I noticed today that I have a lot of this kind of thing going on. So I'll have a lot of empty space in one jar, and then I have smaller jars that are completely full. So what I'm going to need to do is kind of consolidate items and go through and do that. So this is something that I try to do maybe quarterly around here. We go through food fairly quickly around here. The bulk food jars get drained, and we just need to make sure that things are consolidated so that we're not wasting space on the shelves, and I can have a more accurate picture of everything that we have in storage. So that will help organize the pantry shelves. I also need to go through my freezers and see what berries and things are still sitting in there that need to be used up, and I will make a plan for that. That might include freeze drying some of that to get it out of the freezer so that I can have space for the upcoming berry season. It'll be strawberry season here very shortly, and I'm going to be wanting to have space to freeze berries, the strawberries, and get those in the freezer in place of last year's stuff. So we need to do that. I know I also have some bags of produce that last summer kind of got stuck in the freezer just toward the end of canning season. I was feeling a little burnout, so I just started throwing pears and peaches and grapes into big gallon-sized freezer bags, and I know I have some of that left that needs to be canned up. So it's just a good opportunity now. It's a rainy day. What else am I going to do? Let's make sure that we know everything that we have in storage, and this will help us make a better plan for what we need to grow and preserve this year. If I find in doing kind of my inventory and organizing today that I have tons of blueberries left over, I don't need to preserve as many this year because obviously we aren't using as much as I thought that we would. So just as I advocate for making sure you do a full inventory and assessment at the end of the harvest season leading into winter so that you have an accurate picture of what you need to use through the winter, if you're doing a pantry challenge or something, it is just as important heading into the growing season to do another inventory of what you have left so you can adjust your amounts of what you do and don't need to grow or preserve as much of this year. All right, that's enough rambling. I'm going to get to work, and then after we get done, I'll tell you where I'm going to go from here and talk to you a little bit about my plans for the growing season and preserving season. So as you guys know, my rule throughout the winter was whenever 7 quart jars emptied up, it was my job to refill them with something I could can through the winter, whether it was broth or meat or dried beans. I made a lot of juices over the winter, and so that is why I don't have as many empties as, I should, because we've used up the majority of the produce that was canned is already used. What we have left is just a lot of meats and broths and beans and things that I preserved a ton of last year, like applesauce and grape juice and that. So right now we're just going through and organizing. As I mentioned, it can get quite messy when you just pull things from the shelf and you just add things back into empty spots. It can end up chaos on your shelves. So just getting that all organized, also condensing things, and all of the new food that we got from Azure this month needs to be put into our storage containers. I always get lots of questions about where I get my big gallon glass jars. A lot of these are just recycled pickle jars, either pickles that we purchased from like Sam's Club, or I've also gotten free pickle jars from restaurants. If you find a restaurant that serves hamburgers with kind of pickles on the side, they will often have a bunch of empty pickle jars that they need to get rid of. So if you ask around, that's a great way to find some free jars, and that's what we've done in the past. So if we can't find free ones, I've also purchased glass gallon jars from Azure Standard. They do have a good bulk price on those if you can't find them elsewhere. Remember, this is our working pantry. We do keep bulk food storage in other places, and so as these jars empty, I have to go and get into my 5-gallon buckets to refill the jars with the bulk quantities that we have stored elsewhere. So in a working pantry, you always need to rotate your goods. You're always refilling, assessing, making lists of what you're low on, and that's how we keep from running out of things. Always make sure we label our jars, because when you have a lot of white flours and potato starch and powdered sugar and things like that, it's easy to mix them up. So I use a wet erase marker and I write on the lids to make that easier. Okay, let me show you our progress that we made. We've got all the empties put in one spot, and then everything else that's left on the shelf is basically stuff that we've either canned up over the winter or that we canned too much of last year and that we need to really focus on using up. So let me kind of take you through and show you what I'll be using in my meal planning here in the coming weeks. We have lots of beets. I canned these in January and haven't been good about using them. Juice, some meat, tons of beans. We're going to be eating a lot more beans for lunch in the next weeks. We have a little bit of broth. This whole shelf is all condiments, things like barbecue sauce, hot sauce, salsa. I really need to focus on that. Honey, we have tons of grape juice up here. I'm doing a terrible job at using that up, so that'll be a big focus. This whole shelf is all jams of jellies, and those will definitely be used. We have more honey down here in pints, and then this has more broth. We have a lot of pie filling to use up, and there are those canned pears that I couldn't find before. This is all vinegar over here in the corner that also needs used. And then these shelves up here are mostly things like dried herbs and dehydrated veggies, and I kind of pulled all of those almost empty jars toward the front so I can focus on dumping those into pots when I'm making my soups here. So we're looking good. My goal is just to empty the rest of these by mid-July. Our heavy canning season kind of begins then, and I need a lot more empty jars when we reach that point. So we have 2 months to really eat off of that. Next project this week was to plant some more apple trees. So we purchased a Golden Delicious and a Macintosh apple tree, and that's what we were going to plant. You can see we have really heavy clay soil, so I have my helpers here, my little men that are helping me dig the hole. There's Harry. He turned 5 months old on this date, so he's getting quite big. So back to the apple trees. We focus on planting a tree to honor each of the children in our family, and we had yet to plant Benji's tree and the baby that we miscarried last October. We wanted to have a tree to honor him, and so those are the 2 trees that we were planting this day. And there's Benji trying to hide from Harry. Harry likes to knock him down, so he's staying safe in our fencing that's rolled up there. So there we go. This first tree is done. We're just making sure that we empty a bucket of compost around the tree. That'll help kind of feed it and nourish it. And then we will also add a nice thick layer of mulch on top of this. And now we're working on tree number 2. It's as easy as that. And so we have plans. We want to plant a couple pear trees this year and cherry trees as well. We're just kind of late in the game and are having a hard time finding them, so I'm going to need to order them online. We should have really done this about a month ago, but things have just been busy, as you guys know, and so we're getting to it when we can. And we'll be very excited to have apples, abundant apples here in the next years. So there we go. There's our 2 trees that we planted this week, and we are very excited about that. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my plans for this growing season. A common question that I get asked is, how do I decide what I'm going to grow in my garden? So I thought I would tackle that for you. And what I decide to grow is obviously going to be different than what your family is going to need to grow. We all have different desires. Our families are all different sizes. Some of us just like to grow for fresh eating. Some of us are trying to grow as much as we can to preserve to get through a whole year. So what works for my family might not work for yours, but I want to explain to you the criteria that I use to decide what I'm going to grow. So, you guys can grow anything in your garden pretty much, depending on the zone that you live in. There are so many options. And so for most of us, our garden space is limited. My garden space is only about 2,000 square feet this year. I have downsized tremendously over the last couple of years just to make my garden something that's more manageable for me as a very busy mom that does the majority of the gardening by myself. I want my garden space to be something that I can manage and something that brings me joy. And I found when I had these huge, massive 4,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet gardens, it became a burden and it was overwhelming, and I would end up giving up by the end of the year, and we just weren't harvesting as much. So for me, having a smaller, tidier garden that I can manage will actually produce more food for me, and I'm able to produce quite a bit. But anyways, with the limited garden size, I have to be selective in what crops I choose to grow. And so here are the criteria that I use to decide on what I'm going to allocate garden space to. So the first thing I think about are things that I can't get in the grocery store. So for example, we live in Ohio and it is very hard to find okra in the grocery store. I can think of one place locally that I can find okra for a very short period of time in the summer. I can't find it organic. The only okra that sometimes we can find would be frozen in bags, and that isn't the way my husband prefers to eat it. He wants fresh okra. And so I grow that for him. That's something that's important. So the first thing that I think about when I'm deciding what to grow in my garden is, what does my family want that I can't find elsewhere? And then in terms of things that I can find elsewhere, I look around and see what can I find in bulk quantities that I can preserve that's good quality for a really good price. So some things, for like sweet corn, for example, I could grow our own sweet corn here, but it takes up quite a bit of garden space. And we have a local sweet corn farm that grows a great product, and they have amazing deals. I can go there, and they usually have a canning or preserving deal where if you buy 2 bushels of corn, you get 1 full bushel free. And then when you work out the cost, it's like super cheap then to preserve, 3 bushels of corn. So why would I use my limited garden space that I have to grow corn when I have options that are available locally to me? So there are some things that I choose not to grow simply because better options exist out there, and then I can take my garden space to grow the things like okra that I can't find elsewhere. Another criteria for what I choose to grow in my garden is, what can I grow super easily? So I've been on this property here. This is our 7th year. This might be the 6th year that I've had a garden here. So I know by now the things that grow really well with the pest load that we have, with the soil that we're dealing with our climate, the wind, everything. And I've determined which crops are I can get the most bang for my buck. So one of those things is green beans. I always grow green beans because in a very small amount of space, I can produce a bountiful harvest that I know will give me tons to preserve, to can, to freeze, and get me through the year. So besides okra and green beans, tomatoes are another one of those things. They give you a lot of bang for your buck. Kale and Swiss chard and leafy greens like that, in a very small space, I can grow a ton of it and usually provide enough for my family for the full year. Same with garlic, onions. Those are things I can have I think I have a small like 10 by 10 area of my garden allocated to garlic, and that will produce me enough garlic to get my family through the entire year. I turn some into garlic powder or garlic salt. We'll have enough for fresh eating, and that works out great. So that's another thing in determining what I'm going to grow in the garden, is which crops give you a really good bang for your buck. So for me, that is green beans, tomatoes, garlic, onions, leafy greens. So the final thing I consider in what I'm going to put in my garden is money. Some items are just so expensive to buy in the grocery store that it makes more sense for me to grow them myself. And a prime example, I always mention this on Instagram, I call them money trees, are peppers. one pepper plant. The reason I call it a money tree is that when I go to the grocery store, even for a non-organic bell pepper, the minimum I'm going to pay is usually $1 a pepper. That is a lot of money for one little pepper, especially when you have, a family of 9. If I want to make something like stuffed peppers, I have $9 already, sucked into just the pepper portion of that meal. That's a lot of money when I can, in one little 5-gallon bucket, grow a bell pepper plant that can provide me, tons of peppers. It's just, you get so much bang for your buck, considering, how much peppers cost in the store. So, I always choose to grow peppers for that reason. And then the final thing you want to ask yourself is taste. What are things that taste better when you grow them fresh? There's nothing like a fresh carrot. You eat a carrot that you pull freshly out of the ground compared to one that's sitting at the grocery store. There's literally no comparison. Same thing with tomatoes. I love what my friend Jess at Roots and Refuge Farm says, that store-bought tomatoes, what did she say? Store-bought tomatoes taste like disappointment. That's so true. There's nothing like a warm, juicy tomato fresh off the vine. So that's something that I would always grow, even if I wasn't going to preserve a ton for the winter. Just to have that for fresh eating is worth it. And things like strawberries. Even though I go to a local farm that has organic strawberries for a really good deal, and that's what I purchase to preserve to get us through the whole year, I grow enough strawberries for fresh eating for us through the growing season, because fresh strawberries picked off the plant and eaten in the garden when they're all warm and juicy is literally one of life's greatest pleasures. And so I would grow them just simply for that. Herbs are another thing that I love to grow. Not only do you get a lot of bang for your buck, you can go to the grocery store and you buy a little package of fresh herbs. It's like, $5 for this tiny little package. Whereas you could, even if you don't want to grow them for seed, you can go buy a plant start at the beginning of the growing season for like $2 at a greenhouse, and it will grow and grow and grow and grow throughout the year and give you, tons of fresh herbs to use and save you money. And then the taste wise, being able to go out into your garden and cut fresh herbs daily to put in your meal, there's nothing like that. The quality of it and what it adds to your food is definitely worth the garden space. So throughout the growing season, I'll take you around and show you many of the things that I'm growing and probably explain to you why I chose to grow them. But just for the sake of this video, I wanted to answer that question on how I decide what I'm going to grow in my garden. And those are the criteria that I use. And my main crops, like if I had very limited garden space and could only grow maybe a handful of things, it would be okra, beans, tomatoes, peppers, leafy greens of some sort, and then herbs. And that would probably be it. And then if I could add some extra fun things, I would do, of course, strawberries and let me think, what are some other fun things that I've got out there? Cucumbers, squash is another really great one, zucchini, things like that. But my main things that I would never go without are okra, beans, tomatoes, peppers, and leafy greens, and then of course my herbs. So hopefully that answers the question.
It's been a while since I've given you a garden tour, and it's rained a lot this week, so I haven't done much, but I was able to accomplish a lot last week that I didn't share with you because we didn't make a video. So we've got a little bit of basil in here. This whole bed here is full of lettuce, and we have a little bit of like Swiss chard and some other random greens kind of mixed in with the lettuce, but this will kind of be our salad bar bed. When we want a salad, we'll just come out and cut some stuff. And then I had to buy some cilantro starts because my seed didn't germinate, unfortunately. So this end of the bed is all full of cilantro. Down here, this is all kale and mustard greens. And these were seeds that I started in those milk jugs over the winter with you guys. And look at how beautiful they turned out. So we love winter sowing. Check out my videos on that method if you want to learn more about that. I'll link it in the description. This whole bed is the radishes that I planted several videos ago, and those will be ready to harvest in just a few more weeks. That'll be very exciting. This bed here has my cabbages, and the bottom leaves are kind of yellowing a little bit, so I need to see what nutrients this soil is lacking and go ahead and fix that problem. But This whole bed, Lord willing, will be cabbages for our family to make sauerkraut and things. Here is the garlic that we planted last October. It's looking nice. We have a bunch of perennial garlic over here. That's just wild garlic that keeps coming back every year. And then over here, I moved some strawberries into these towers, and they are starting to blossom, which is really exciting. I love fresh strawberries, so looking forward to that. My garlic really needs weeded. It's a mess right now, but we will get to that just as soon as we can. In this bed, we will likely plant zucchini. That's the plan. And then in this bed, I already planted some carrots that have begun to germinate. And once they get a little bigger, I'll need to come in and kind of thin them out. And then these two beds over here have already been planted with bush bean seeds, several different varieties. And I think I planted them about 5 days ago. I keep coming out stalking the beds, just waiting to see the little bean sprouts popping through the soil. And anytime I see something green, I'm like, there it is. And then I'm like, oh, wait, no, that's a weed. So hopefully soon we will have some bean sprouts popping through the soil. I also planted pole beans on these 3 towers. And then around the pole beans, I put the parsley that I had started by seed over the winter around this one. And then I did some radishes around the other set here. These will also be ready in a couple weeks. That will be one of our first harvests from the garden and is very exciting. This bed right here contains my cucumbers that will grow up this trellis. And then underneath the trellis, I put my lettuce that will help kind of shade out and keep the lettuce cool and prevent it from bolting. And then we have just some random celery starts. I had some space here, so I put celery there. Another row of radishes here, and then I have all of my snow peas. You can see some holes where they didn't germinate. I need to go back and fill in, but we're very excited to have snow peas this year. And then this row is more lettuce that I started winter sown. So they're tiny, but they are coming up. And then this is all of the little onion starts that I started by seed inside the house. And then on this half, I planted onion sets that you can see are just starting to pop up from the soil. So this is kind of an experiment I'm doing this year, half by seed, half by set. And I want to see in this particular bed with this soil, which of those will produce a better onion bulb. And then in my holes, of course, I moved my strawberries. They're beginning to blossom, and that will produce more of our strawberries for fresh eating this year. This bed is a wreck. You can see it's a muddy mess right now from all the rain. This is my perennial herb bed. It contains about 4 different types of mint that just kind of come up, pop up wild. You know, mint spreads like crazy. I also added a couple other perennial herbs that I'm hoping won't get choked out by the mint. I did some mullein and some lemon bee balm in that bed. And then just a little more celery here in a tub kind of on the end. I just put things wherever I have space, just trying to grow as much food as I can. I moved some chives to the end of this bed and added some sage and parsley. The rest of this will be planted with winter squash. And then I had some potatoes that had sprouted in my cupboard, and I planted it in this bed. These two will be full of okra with some random tomatoes and peppers kind of tucked in on the ends there. I have just a few winter sown jugs left. The seedlings inside, which are not coming into focus by the camera, these are all basil, and they're so tiny that I'm letting them grow a little more before I move them so that they'll survive the transplanting. There you go. Lots of basil. Basil's a great companion plant for tomatoes, and so my plan is to just plant all that basil around my tomato plants. I have this empty bed that I haven't figured out what I want to do with yet, but this whole area here will all be tomatoes that I'm planting in the ground. I'll burn some holes in this fabric with a propane torch. I haven't touched this area. It's a mess, but all these pots will be my peppers, and then I'll have more herbs and flowers in these towers over here. Some mint has spread to this area. This needs weeded like crazy. And then here's my lemon balm that's really coming up. So I have a lot of work to do out here, guys. I just can't get out here because of the rain. Here are my blackberries that are all greening up beautifully. Unfortunately, this front half of my blackberries, the bunnies got to this year, and they chewed up. You see, there's no leaves on any of these because the bunnies kind of girdled the bottom
of the canes by chewing on them. So they are all dead, and I'm very upset about this, but I'm going to need to rip all of these out, and then I'll make a new plan for this area. I'll weed it all and till it up, and we'll plant something else on this front half of my blackberry area here. But this week I've got my hands full. It's supposed to be sunny and in the 80s, and so my plan is just to knock out the rest of this garden work, and hopefully by the end of next week I can video that for you and it will all look very different. Until then, friends, have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you next week when all of this is cleaned up. All right, bye.